Good morning. Somebody said Ruth, yes. Ruth from the Bible, yes. But I never slept at Boaz's feet. Mainly Ross, actually. But the olfactory wasn't there. I'm sorry. Our reading today is from Matthew 14, verses 22 to 33. Immediately he, meaning Jesus, made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Your word, O Lord, is a lamp unto our feet, and a light unto our path.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm just taking a moment because I know what I'm supposed to preach based on my own youth and growing up, and I know what I know what you might be thinking I'm going to preach, and I know I'm not going there. So I'm just taking a moment. I've met people with all kinds of confidence in their faith, all kinds of confidence levels in the faith that they hold. I've met people who are crippled because they feel like they don't have enough faith. They turn up all the time. They're very faithful people, but they'll almost crippled inside because they just, I don't have enough faith. I don't have enough. It almost stops them from acting at all. Or at least they don't have enough faith that God is real and present and active. They can't see God active in their own lives because they haven't had a ghost on the water walking towards them. And I've met other people who are, and look, it's biblically based. There are people, I've met people whose faith comes out of the way of, they've got faith that can move mountains. They've got faith, that I can do all things through God who strengthens me. Here I am, Lord, send me. They're those kind of people whose faith is, publicly really, really strong in your faith. You don't question it. They're very confident. I've often watched people, I've seen it happen a number of times, where people of the second category I've watched them run very ordinarily attended events and blamed the non-attenders. I've watched people lose money because they were certain God was going to do a particular thing because their faith had told them so. I've watched leaders become very unstuck, a little unhinged, when they've had this kind of level of confidence in their own faith, what God is going to do. It's left me, I'm in my 41st year of full-time Christian ministry. And you might look at my faith and say, gee, Graham doesn't talk about God a lot for a minister. Or when we talk one-on-one at times, you might think, why isn't Graham kind of like leaning more into the presence and the actions of God? I don't know if anyone thinks like that, and I don't want to put questions in your head if you don't. Then I'm happy to answer that question away from here as well, if you don't like my answer that I'm giving now. But it's because I've seen so much, and I've tried to learn how to be. I'm still in that learning phase of life and ministry of working out when is this of God and when is this just of somebody, and how can I promise God's action on something when other people get silence. Don't get me wrong. I see God regularly in lots of different things that go on and the people that we meet. I see the presence of God in action. I get to see it almost every day, and I'm thankful. But I still don't know that I've got the right language for it all the time. And that may well come through in everything I'm about to share now. The trouble is, I think, of what I was sharing before, especially for when our confidence far exceeds our competence, to take a phrase from Utopia, in this unbridled, in this space where God is going to do amazing things through me. God is going to do great things through me. In this space of unbridled, unchallenged, God is great, God is good, is going to prove how great and faithful God is. There's a problem. Because the risk is we fall into this particular trap. And the trap is this, is that it's unspoken, but we live with this sense that God exists and is present to serve what we think God should be doing. God exists to meet our needs, to make sure we get everything from a parking spot to enough money in the bank to retire comfortably. That God exists to make sure we meet the right partner. That's God's work. Like, that's what should be keeping God up at night. That we get the right partner, we get the right job, we get the right, that everything in our lives is working out okay. That our honour is upheld. That's God's job, to make sure that we look good, rather than the other way around. That what should be keeping us up at night, is working out how do we be part of what God is doing. That God's honour is upheld. That the people that matter to God are the people that matter to us. You hear what I'm saying? Now, I'm going to be honest here and say it's a fine line. It's a very fine line. And I don't want to sound like I'm standing here passing judgment on people who've got a strong public faith or a strong public voice. Because often God does work that way too. But for myself, and what I'm going to be preaching on today, is this sense of finding humility in the middle of action. In this sense of who are we called to be, what are we called to do? One of the ways to get it right in terms of whether this is of God or of me is to start from a place of humility. Because this sense that I'm going to stand here and tell you what God's about to do, just follow me, do what I say, to me sounds much less like an act of humility and much more like an act of testing God. Putting God to the test. And I can't help but feel in today's passage that Peter puts himself, as soon as Peter gets out of the boat, well, even before that, because the key line for Peter, I think, in the passage, or the key line that I know I get stuck on too, there's times when I sit there and think, gee, Jesus sounds a bit tough on people sometimes. I mean, Peter got out of the boat. The other disciples didn't. So Jesus, what's this thing about why did you doubt? Why don't you say to him, well done, Pete, you gave it a go. Why isn't that the line? A little bit of faith grows, in a mustard seed, faith grows, massive big plants, and, why wasn't that the encouragement? Why does Peter get met with, why did you doubt? Where's you of little faith? And I rather suspect, I'm going to be honest here and say, I'm very aware that I might be doing a disservice to Peter. We're 2,000 years on. Matthew's is the only gospel that records Peter getting out of the boat, all right? Mark and Luke both record the storms and the rocky seas and the disciples in the boat being a bit fearful. I don't know whether the author of Matthew didn't like Peter that much and thought he would remind him of something he did that was rather embarrassing. I'm not sure. And I might be doing a disservice to Peter here because there's no in the Greek. There's no real... It pretty much is as we get it. But what I suspect is going on here a little bit, and maybe the author is trying to help us hear this a little bit, and we lose it in the translation and in the interpretation, is that Peter shifts into a space of testing Jesus. They're out on the lake. The waves are rocky. This is the second time Matthew tells a story of the disciples on the lake and things being rocky. The first time around, it was so bad that the waves were crashing over the boat. And Jesus was asleep in the front of the boat. You might remember that, right? That's the version we get in Mark as well, right? That's all right. Are they telling a better message than I am? Because it might... That's all right. It's okay. It's all good. It's all right. They might be doing it better, but maybe I should get someone else to come and tell this. So Jesus, we've been following this reading along the way, and they've gone across the lake. Jesus was probably looking for solitary time. The crowds turn up. They feed the 5,000. He cures the sick. Then Jesus sends the disciples back I always find that a bit odd because I just don't know. It does say in the beginning of the chapter that Jesus went across privately, but suddenly the disciples were there too. And I don't know whether Jesus took a boat over on his own and there was already a boat there. So the disciples did, you know what I mean? Why did Jesus end up stuck on the other side of the lake on his own? What did they think was going to happen? Did Jesus have another boat over to come over? I don't know. But Jesus sends the disciples on their way. Go back. You go back. I'm going to take some time away. He goes up to a mountain to get the time that he really thought he was going to get. The disciples are out on the lake. The winds come up. The waves are a little bit rocky, perhaps. They've been battering into the wind the whole night to get home. And next thing they see this figure walking along the water. It's pretty freaky, isn't it? And I want to be really clear here that people just say, well, surely you could tell it was Jesus, but you know, there are other times in this divine state that Jesus is unrecognisable. This isn't the only time that people don't recognise Jesus in that divine state. They recognise him when he's performing miracles, when he's human to human miracles. But when Jesus raises from the dead, the women in the garden mistake him for the gardener. The people on the road to Emmaus mistook him just for another traveller who was just a stranger to Jerusalem. So there's this kind of figure coming across the water at them. And probably the key words that get missed, I think, sometimes in the telling of this story, is that what does Jesus say to the disciples? Don't be afraid. Don't fear. Take heart. It is I. So Jesus has identified himself. He's already identified himself. I mean, I know what it's like. There's nothing worse than getting a phone call when someone says, you remember the old days when you didn't come up with the number on your phone, and you'd take a phone call, and then someone would just say, hello, this is such, and someone would just say, it's me. It might be a bit like that. I hate that, and sometimes you've got to try and ask about 3 or 4 questions to make it sound like, oh yes, I know who me is, but I got no idea really. Yeah. Anyway, so Jesus, so don't. Take heart. Don't be afraid. It's I. It's me. What are Peter's next words? If it is you. So Peter's sort of not taking Jesus at his word in some ways. Or Peter's had a grand idea, because Peter's next words are, if it is you, tell me to come. Get out of the boat. So whose idea is that? Did that come from Jesus? Was that Jesus testing Peter's faith? Was that Jesus giving Peter an opportunity to shine in his faith or to do something miraculous through? The idea comes from Peter. And that's why I said earlier, it kind of, in a sense, mirrors the whole Jesus. I'm not saying Peter is the evil one, but I'm just trying to say that it mirrors the wilderness experience, where the evil one says to Jesus, if you are the Son of God, then do this. And Peter's saying to Jesus, if it is you, I'm going to come on the water. You're going to help me. You're going to make me walk on the water to come to you. And I wonder just how enthusiastic Jesus' come was. I don't know. But as you know the story, Peter starts to sink, all right? And I know that people will read this as that's the fault. That's the fear. That's the faith problem here, is when Jesus starts to sink, because you should keep your eyes directly on Jesus and walk. And if I'd got out of the boat, I would have done exactly the same thing. I would have kept my eyes on, I would have done different to Peter. I've learnt now, I'd do different to Peter. I'd get out of the boat and I'd walk straight, keep my eyes on Jesus because my faith is strong, and I'd walk straight that way. Just don't let the distractions of the world get in the way. That's the proper sermon. That's the proper homily, right? I know that. Keep your eyes on Jesus, everything else, and don't get distracted by the problems of the world, the problems in your life. Just keep your eyes straight on Jesus. And if that's the homily you need to hear, you've got it in 2 sentences. Go home with that. That's fine. But I think that the thing I want to push on a little harder on is just that this is all Peter's idea. Getting out of the boat is Peter's idea. And I have met so many people, and I'm one of them, I'll put my hand up, who have got myself into a mess in life thinking this is what God wants me, this is what I, almost, if I'm being honest with myself, this is what I want God to be wanting me to do. This is what I want God to be wanting me to do. Puts me in the limelight, puts me, but like it comes out as this is what God's calling me to be. This is what God's calling me to do. It's a fine line. It's a really fine line. And I don't have great answers. I wish I did. I wish I could stand here and tell you how to tell the difference between the two. And what I don't want is for today's homily to undermine your sense of courage, or to undermine your sense of, our sense of doing what we understand God to be calling us to do. And I think that in some ways that's a little bit of my answer, is that these kind of things are community things. They're things for us as a community, as a group of people to do together. That we're not called to stand up above other people and act like we know the mind of God. We need to test it really clearly with others. We need to be sure that we're on a journey, and if we are the leader of that journey, that we're taking others with us. So look, friends, we often get ourselves into mess. We often find ourselves out of the boat, out in the middle of the water. Well, I want to go back a step. I think a lot of us find ourselves out in the boat in the water on rocky seas. Life can be tough. And I guess the thing is that we're invited through this passage to remember that in the middle of rough seas, Jesus will find us. And now maybe the call on us isn't to test Jesus by saying, get me out of the rough seas, but the call on our lives is to say, God, Jesus, save me. Because here's the thing, Jesus will walk with us. This is one thing I do like about this passage, is that Jesus will walk with us, whether we've got ourselves into the mess or whether it's a mess that's going on that we find ourselves stuck in the middle of. Like Peter gets out of the boat. That's his own doing. Jesus doesn't let him drown to teach him a lesson. As soon as Peter turns his focus from his own confidence to his own plight, Lord, save me. I've worked out very quickly, I can't do this. I'm not able to do this on my own. Save me. Jesus has got an outstretched hand. And so, friends, I guess that's where I just want to leave things today, is that there is a final line. The final line in our passage today. Can anyone remember what the final line is? It's okay. You don't. It doesn't stand out. But the passage ends with the answer to, if it is you. The passage ends with the answer to, if you are the Son of God, from the wilderness test. It finishes with the words, surely Jesus is the Son of God. And that's what I'm going to leave you with, that in the middle of our messes, either the ones we find ourselves in or the ones that come upon us, or the ones we get ourselves into the middle of. The faithful act is to recognise that God will meet us in the midst. That's something we don't ever need to doubt. It may not always feel like it, and I know I'm going to get emails during the week from one or two. I've got one or two people who are emailing me at the moment. But I'm just saying, it's not always going to fix everything up. But it's a great starting point for getting life back on track, is to recognise that the outstretched hand of Jesus is there to walk with you, whatever the mess of whoever's making. It'll be okay.